We are back with the former acting director of the FBI and the author of the new book, The Threat: How the FBI Protects America in the Age of Terror and Trump. Andrew McCabe is back with us. And in the book, you describe your first visit to the Oval Office to see President Trump, which was your first business visit to the Oval Office. You once stood at the doorway on a tour and looked across the velvet rope.
That's right.
That's the closest you'd gotten. But you described it as your loyalty test.
That's right. That's right. As soon as I came into the room, the president, you know, he's an overwhelming communicator. He stood up, came over to me, shook my hand, and immediately launched into kind of a monologue on how great things were, and it was terrific that they had fired the FBI director and how people were so happy about that. This was not what I was seeing in my own building. People were clearly in a state of shock. And then he said to me, I heard you were part of the resistance. And I thought, I'm not sure what you mean by that, sir. And I said exactly that to him. And he said, I heard that you were one of those people who didn't agree with Jim Comey and didn't support the decisions he made, and you weren't a part of that team. I said, no, sir, that's not true. I worked very closely with Director Comey, and I was a part of all those decisions. If you're referring to the Clinton email case, I was a part of those decisions last summer. I knew right then I hadn't given him the answer he was looking for, and so we kind of got off on that very awkward foot shortly after I stepped into the room.
You write in the book that fear is why he asks people to pledge personal loyalty.
I think that's true. I think that's true. This is something that I first became familiar with working organized crime cases in New York. What I saw in the Oval Office was not dissimilar to the same sort of statements and manipulation and that obsessive focus on loyalty, and not loyalty in the way we think of loyalty as loyalty to country and loyalty to purpose and mission, but loyalty in terms of, are you with me or are you against me? Are you on my team or are you one of the enemy? And I think the president, it was my own experience, that is his instinctive reaction, in the same way that the leader of a criminal enterprise or a mob boss is constantly assessing the loyalty of those soldiers and people around him, because it's essential to his own existence. I think our own president is
You worked on investigations here in New York City, not of the Italian mob, but on basically Russian organized crime that moved in here. In your experience in the FBI, and with other law enforcement officials, when the investigators of the Italian mafia, of Russian organized crime, the investigators of drug dealers, they generally don't like the people they're investigating. Isn't that a fair thing to say when they're investigating drug dealers and mobsters?
That's right. It's a fair generalization.
Right. So, and I raise that point simply because the President of the United States seems to be suggesting that the only fair way he can be investigated is to be investigated by people who like him. If you don't like him, you cannot fairly investigate him. I
think that's exactly right. I think that it shows just how little this president and his administration supporters understand about the way a democratic government functions. Like, we don't have political tests for government servants in this country. We expect our civil servants, our career government officials, our career professionals to come in and serve every day in a way that's independent of politics. They leave their personal preferences at the door, and they dedicate themselves to serving their communities, to serving their country, because they have that sense of purpose. That is what I saw across 21 years of working in the FBI. Men and women who were committed to protecting Americans and upholding the Constitution. Not people who were, checking in as Republicans or Democrats to sort out who would work on which investigation. We have a job to do, and that's protecting America. It's incredibly serious, it's incredibly hard, and we do that by looking at the facts that we uncover in our investigations, the information that comes to us, and making decisions based only on that in terms of who to investigate and where to go next.
And no matter how much you don't like the Russian mobsters you were investigating, you couldn't bring a case against them if you didn't have the evidence, if you couldn't find the evidence. And that's the part the president seems to ignore. The book is, the New York Times review of the book says that it's well written, which it is, and I think one of the great writing challenges of the book is that the word stupid never appears. You have many passages where you could just shorthand it to stupid. This is one of them. You talk about Jeff Sessions, and he's talking about the FBI, and he says, back in the old days, he said, you all only hired Irishmen. They were drunks, but they could be trusted, not like all those new people with nose rings and tattoos. Who knows what they're doing? Did you raise your hand and say, General, I am Irish?
You know, I thought with a name like McCabe, that was fairly self-evident, but
not to Jeff
not.
Sessions.
Apparently not. You know, Lawrence, in these moments, we'd be sitting in a small room, a skiff, protected for top-secret discussions. A very small group of people, senior leadership of the Bureau, senior leadership of DOJ. When the Attorney General would make remarks like this, it was silence. We wouldn't react. We just kind of stare at him. I mean, I personally never wanted to indicate any sort of agreement. We needed to just try to push on and try to get him focused on the work that we were doing at the table. But it was incredibly odd and awkward.